I'm going to move in the first instance with this item. Second, for discussion, Councillor Simpson. And I just want to welcome everybody and all yours.
Morena, councillors. I'm Liz Civil, I'm the Manager of Community Policy, and alongside me is Katarana Maki, the GM of our department, and Antonia Butler in my team. So Antonia is going to introduce this item as she's done the work in this case, and take you through our very brief presentation of the key findings from this work.
Thank you. This report seeks that the committee agree to the findings of the Northwest Community Facility Provision Investigation. In a bit of background, in 2015, the governing body approved the Community Facilities Network Plan and its associated action plan. The action plan identified a priority action in relation to a gap in aquatic provision across Auckland's northwest. The study area includes parts of the Rodney Local Board, parts of the Upper Harbour Local Board, and parts of the Henderson-Massey Local Board, where the gap was most apparent. Because of the level of growth anticipated across this area, the investigation was expanded to cover the full scope of the Community Facilities Network Plan, which includes, as well as aquatic, leisure and recreation, libraries, community centres and halls, arts and culture facilities, and venues for hire. The purpose of the investigation was to determine if there are current gaps in provision, and if there are likely to be future gaps, and when and where these may occur. In delivery of this work, we workshopped twice with each of the local boards that were in the study area, and also reported our findings to them in September prior to coming to committee. The investigation found that, as you can see up in the slide, that existing provision at the moment is sufficient to support current demand. However, growth across the area is likely to put pressure on existing facilities and neighbouring facilities, which will create a new demand for facilities across the area. There is some capacity in existing facilities, particularly in venues for hire and community spaces. Across the study area, library usage and recreation and leisure usage is increasing. However, increased provision in aquatic and leisure and recreation facilities was a common theme from the social research and community engagement that has occurred across the area. As the population grows and develops, the community profile of that area is changing. There is an aging baseline population. However, as development occurs, it is bringing in younger working people and families. Ethnic diversity is also changing across the study area, which is likely to bring in demand for new service types. There is also disparity across the Northwest study area. Some rural areas, such as the Upper Rodney area and Cumu, are geographically isolated and have limited access to community spaces and facilities. There is also socioeconomic disparity across the area. While much of it is relatively affluent, the more urban areas of Westgate and Massey have high levels of deprivation. This socioeconomic deprivation is linked to lower levels of participation. We could go to the next slide. The gap analysis that was undertaken for the study area found the following: that for aquatic, there is a requirement for aquatic provision from 2026. The Westgate and Massey area, which is the orange area at the bottom of the study area, was identified as the optimal location for aquatic provision because the majority of the people in the study area would be captured within a 5-kilometre catchment. This area also has the additional benefit of reaching residents in the lower area of the Henderson-Massey Local Board area that experience high levels of deprivation. So those people would also still be within the 5-kilometre catchment, enabling increased access. In relation to recreation and leisure, there is also a future requirement for additional recreation and leisure space across the study area. The investigation identified that the optimal locations for this was in the Cumu-Huapai area by 2026, and then in the Henderson-Massey or Upper Harbour area by 2036. Locating additional indoor courts in the Cumu-Huapai area will address disparity in access to facilities due to the geographic isolation of this area. An additional recreation and leisure space in Henderson-Massey or Upper Harbour in the future would provide increased local services in an area that has high population density for the future and a community profile that will align well with recreation and leisure facility users. In relation to arts, library, and community services, there is no requirement for additional space. There is, however, the need to address immediate condition issues at QMU Library, and if that library were to close, this would create a gap in the local network. Staff are reporting to the Rodney Local Board in November on options on how to address the immediate condition issues. There may also be a future need for community arts and community spaces and art space in Whenuapai from 2026 to address population, and also additional library, arts, and community space in QMU by 2036 to support population growth across that area. So following the gap analysis, the recommendations associated with this investigation are as follows. The next slide, please. That staff progress with the indicative business case for aquatic provision as approved through the long-term plan. That staff progress with the indicative business case for recreation and leisure space in Rodney as approved through the long-term plan. That we progress to the indicative business case for recreation and leisure space in Upper Harbour and Massey area as approved through the long-term plan. And finally, that we monitor population growth in Whenuapai and QMU and progress with an indicative business case when the population reaches approximately 10,000 people.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you.
That's all right. Katarina, Liz, any further comments? Questions only. Councillor Watson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to pick up some of the points that the Upper Harbour Local Board had raised in terms of the study area there, and we saw the map, in particular the area that's just to the east of the Green High Bridge, which is, you know, quite a populous area and fast growing. They just have to come over the bridge. From my knowledge, quite a reasonable number of people head west rather than, you know, head to Albany. Could you just give me a response to that comment or observation of the board that really it should have perhaps been a slightly bigger area, or that might have come up with perhaps different findings?
Through the chair, the study area was determined because this was the strongest concentration of gap for aquatic provision. With Albany Pool, a lot of users travel that way or down through to the West Wave area. In relation to recreation and leisure provision, the data that we have suggests a split that people in the Whenuapai and Hobsonville area travel down to the Westgate, Massey area. Although people on the other side of the bridge, while some travel down that way, it is a lower number of users. This study was designed to address the gap in local provision in relation to the Upper Harbour request is in relation to sub-regional provision. Now that work is intended to go ahead, but what we've been attempting to address here is the gap in local provision of a 5-kilometre catchment in relation to rec and leisure and aquatic.
Okay, thanks. The other point I just would bring up that they also mention, of course, is we've got the latest census data to come out. This is incredibly fast-growing areas with huge development that's occurred and is continuing to occur. Obviously, there will be some sense in reviewing that data when it comes through, I would have thought.
Through the chair, yes, this report acknowledges the risk around population projections. In our analysis, we used the most recent data on population estimates and projections that were used for the LTP and also for the Auckland Plan. However, as new census material becomes available, that can be used in the indicative business case to reassess population numbers along with any new modelling associated with that.
Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Simpson and then Cooper.
My questions actually have been asked already by Councillor Watson. That's exactly my two questions, so thank you.
Okay. Councillor Cooper.
Thank you. Thanks. It's an absolutely chock-a-block report. It must have taken a long time and a lot of work's gone into it, so I do appreciate that. Having lived in this area for over 25 years and also grew up in my teens and went to Massey High School, so I'm just prefacing I do know the area, and representing it in Waitakere City Council, is that we must include Massey East. If you look at that, that's much more isolated. Massey West, you can just go, whip down Triangle Road, whip down Donbuck, and get to West Wave and places like that quite easily in the stadium. But Massey East is a whole different type of area, and it should be included. And for example, within the last 2 years, we've had 190 homes built just on the old education site in Moya Road. So that's another, you know, how many families is that? And young families. So for me, we must include that. That bumps up that population just like that. And also, you know, we never thought we'd have Red Hills as well. I went to an announcement a couple of weeks ago there, and they're already building the houses there. And what surprises me in this is that we have 2 basketball courts, and that's a huge catchment. Massey is one of the largest suburbs in the country. It's over 40,000 people. It is split by the motorway, but the reality is it's a huge, and it's a very young suburb. A high Pacifica, it's the second highest Pacifica and second highest Māori population in Auckland after Manukau. So we have young populations, and these kids love to play sports. So for me, only having 2 indoor courts is not sufficient. And what's happening now is even when you move out of, you know, take the library out of that current leisure centre, it has not got the configuration, it hasn't got the height to be converted to indoor courts, so we can't pin our hopes on that. We have Waitakere Stadium that has a bumping policy because it needs to run commercially as well. So they can be booked in there and they're gone within a moment, they can't play. And also people say you could use the netball courts, no, because we need to pay for a sprung floor in there. So in a really wide geographical radius, there's not much access. Brand new gym at Marina View School, but they don't open it up. You know, so I just really think we've got to rethink the indoor court provision. And it's such a wide catchment. Kids from Kumu come to play at Massey. You know, and I think that we've had an issue of, you know, so what I'm asking you, and that's my question, is will you reconsider that? Because I do think, you know, 2013 census is too small, is too far away to give a real picture of the growth and the need for indoor court provision. Thank you. That was my question. Will you do that for us?
Good answer is yes.
Thank you.
Yes, through the chair, the next stage of the indicative business case is that opportunity to retest the growth data as new information comes in, and if there is a significant difference, the implications of that will be assessed through the indicative business case phase.
Thank you.
That's answered my question. Okay.
Okay. Councillor Sayers.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the report. I just had 2 questions. First question was just around the Rodney local board's comment in the report requesting that their one local board initiative for the indoor court provision was, that's in Huapai, and Kemu was kind of progressed as soon as possible. So just wondered if you could perhaps make a comment around the reassurance that we can give them around that, and then I do have a second unrelated question.
So the long-term plan agreed that the local board could have an indicative business case developed. It's actually all of your indicative business cases, because actually this is the committee that approves them. Local boards only actually get to endorse or support them. So that work has already started with them. We have been using this data as well. We've already had, I think it's 1 or 2 workshops with the Rodney local board. There are, you know, people are having to understand what an indicative business case is. So the first indicative business case we've done for community facilities was FO. So the organisation, the FO Aquatic, has changed its approach to how it assesses new investment. So this bunch will be the second tranche of indicative business cases that you will all consider.
Right, well, thank you for that. And through you, Mr Chair, the second question was just perhaps elaborating for the benefit of the other councillors and myself, with regard to the significant to do with the community library, what those significant condition issues are that might be forcing it to close and what needs to be addressed there, just so we've got a feel for the work that's required. Thank you.
Through the chair, the QMU library suffers condition issues in association with weather tightness, which has led to dampness and leaking into the subfloor and through the ceiling. So staff across council have been working to look at options on how to best address these condition issues. We provided a workshop to the local board in September, and we will follow up with them with a report in November outlining the variable options for their consideration on how we can most quickly and efficiently address those weather tightness issues.
Okay, very good. Very good. Thank you, Mr Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Sayers. Councillor Clough, I think you might be the last in regards to questions.
Can you just give us an update on I think it's the QMU Squash Club and their the Rodney Board's intention to try and fast track some mutual recreation space with the squash club. Has anything happened there? I think it was their Ollie actually.
Yeah.
Through the chair, I cannot confirm the status of that. I know that some of that work was investigated in the needs assessment that was done in the development of the Rodney Local Board Ollie, although any options around partnerships or co-delivery of facilities would be investigated through the indicative business case phase as potential options. So the current status, I'm sorry, I cannot tell you.
Okay, so coming up in the next month or two, there'll have to be a status report on all the Ollies anyway. That might be obviously one that we need to make sure it hasn't fallen flat on its face.
So the Ollies are, the indicative business case is progressing, but our ability to tell you here today how that partnership may or may not be going, we're unable to do that.
All good.
Cool. No further questions? Any comments? If there's no comments, I just wanted to point out to everybody here is that you see in red recommendation E. Councillor Watson sort of took on board, as all of us did, around the input from our local boards, and our Chief of Operations spoke to his staff and also ended up agreeing with Councillor Watson and Simpson and myself in regards to putting E in there. Yeah, but I mean, we've agreed to incorporate it into the recommendations, so there's no need to get it moved in second.
Should that be facility provisions, plural?
Provisions?
No, it's provision.
It's a
Provisions
provision.
plural.
It's an A provision
Provisions plural.
of lots of
It's
stuff.
either a provision, but these are multiple.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
it's an overarching.
The intention
Also
is
the
plural.
stuff inside.
Okay.
The intention plural.
Yeah.
Councillor Fletcher.
So provisions.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. And I endorse the E that you're putting up and incorporating into the recommendations. But I wonder whether you need it to be specific to the northwest. We've got areas across Auckland that are where the census data is completely out of date in terms of populations, and I think that you might just put a full stop after community facility provisions, plural. I'm hoping that our officers are watching the data closely. So while I want to see that data being available in the northwest, I also want to see it being available in all of the considerations that our officers are looking at in community facilities. So I would ask that you delete the in the northwest and just put a full stop after provisions.
This
Point of order,
report is
Mr. Chair,
about the
this is,
Northwest.
this item is
No,
about the
look, yeah,
Northwest.
and I'm just saying that, look, it's taken on board in regards to the data that's coming up across the region, but in regards to this particular item, I would rather keep it at Northwest in regards to this particular item. Kataraina ended up sort of nodding with the fact that the census may have an effect across the whole region, but in regards to this particular item, I will leave it at Northwest, and if that's okay with Councillor Simpson, we can then put the recommendation. But it's been taken on
Thank you for
board.
your clarification,
Yeah.
but I take comfort from the fact that the officers, I just felt it was superfluous because the item is about the Northwest, so it's very specific to the Northwest, and whether you needed to put it again, it's neither here nor there, but it will be interesting that the officers are following this closely.
So,
The data from census will be very interesting for all our growth models, but particularly for the community facilities network plan and how that as a whole plan might need to be impacted. So we'll read that as community facility provisions in the Northwest and for the community facility network plan.
Thank you.
did you want to put that? Okay then. So look, I'm going to put the recommendation. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you, ladies. Item 9,